We've got a number of significant developments we are tracking with regard to Israel and Gaza, and we are joined this morning, fortunately, by Jeremy Scahill, of course, co-founder of Dropsite News, alongside our own Ryan Grimm. Great to see you, Jeremy.
Good to see you, man.
Good to be with you guys.
I wanted to start with these very nascent reports we're getting of some type of an explosion in Doha. There is some speculation it could have been at the Hamas offices there. So, Jeremy, what can we say about the possibility of what's going on here?
Well, without speculating on the particulars of it, because at this point we don't know anything factually other than there's reports of an explosion, Israel has made clear for decades that it's willing to assassinate Palestinian political figures, resistance leaders, etc. But in recent weeks, the chief of staff of the Israeli army said quite explicitly that if Hamas does not surrender, it's not only going to obliterate and annihilate all of Gaza, but that it is going to target for assassination Hamas leaders abroad. Now, of course, most of the Hamas figures that are trying to negotiate these ceasefire deals and are essentially running the organization politically are outside of Gaza, and many of them are in Doha, in Qatar. And of course, Israel last summer assassinated the political leader of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh, in a strike in Tehran, Iran. It also assassinated recently, it's also assassinated much of the on-the-ground leadership of the Qassam brigades, the armed wing of Hamas, as well as the political leader in Gaza of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar. So Israel has a long history of assassinating Palestinian political figures. In fact, many years ago, there was an incredible story that happened where Khalid Mashal, one of the leaders of Hamas, was in Jordan in the Middle East, and Israeli Mossad agents poisoned him. And it caused a huge diplomatic uproar between Jordan and Israel. And essentially, a Mossad agent had to fly on a plane with the antidote for this poison to resuscitate Khalid Mashal. So, it's something out of a movie, but that actually happened. So, we should be watching this very carefully because Donald Trump is, put forward this vague ceasefire proposal that we're going to talk about. And it seems like anytime there's the possibility of some form of negotiation, the Israelis not only escalate on the ground in Gaza, but then increase their threats, like we're seeing now, to potentially assassinate external leadership of Hamas.
Right. I mean, Jeremy, we were talking a bit before the break, but it's very important to note, there are hundreds of thousands of Americans present in Doha, not to mention all of the troops that are there. And it is, of course, been a way station for a lot of the diplomatic talks between the United States, between the world, Hamas and Israel. And so, of course, it would be sending a message just as previous Israeli assassinations like in Tehran and elsewhere did. We did want originally to talk to you about this ceasefire proposal. We can go ahead and put it up here on the screen just so you can give us some insight. It's a 100-word ceasefire proposal from Trump to Hamas. Can you break it down for us, the level of seriousness and what exactly it means?
Well, I think first it's important to look at the broader context here. Right now, Israel is in the midst of a sort of final solution operation in Gaza City, where they're just systematically targeting these massive high-rise buildings where some of them have 100 or more apartments in them. And Netanyahu said last night that all of the residents, we're talking about 1 million people of Gaza City, need to leave immediately, or they're going to consider them Hamas combatants. So that's the backdrop of what's happening right now, is this intensification by Israel. Hamas, 3 weeks ago on August 18th, actually accepted what Qatari mediators said was 98% of the terms of what was called the Witkoff framework. This was the deal that's being negotiated for months that would have been a 60-day ceasefire where half of the Israeli living captives and half of the deceased captives would have been released in exchange for a large number of Palestinians held by Israel. And Hamas made massive concessions and agreed to this framework, and then Israel never responded to it. And what happened is that the Trump administration and the Israeli government said, oh, no, we don't want that deal anymore. We want now an all-in deal where Hamas immediately releases all Israeli captives, living and dead. And so what we obtained was a 100-word summary of what Donald Trump has communicated to Hamas. And what it basically says is that within 48 hours of signing an agreement, Hamas would need to release every single Israeli that it's holding captive, and that a certain number of Palestinians, it doesn't specify how many, some of whom are serving life sentences, others who were snatched from Gaza after October 7th would be released. It says that there would be a 60-day ceasefire, and that Donald Trump would take responsibility for ensuring that the ceasefire held while negotiations to formally end the war took place. What it also says is that there would need to be a new government installed in Gaza in order to even discuss Israeli troop withdrawals. It does say that there will be aid allowed into Gaza, but it doesn't specify how much aid, who would distribute the aid. So, talking privately to officials from Hamas, they have compared this essentially to a surrender document. They suspect that it was written by Israel. The Arabic, where the document was presented in Arabic, was clumsy Arabic, strange word choices. So Hamas is speculating that it was written by Israel, and we know that that has happened in the past with U.S. Proposals. But then Amir Scahill, one of the top propagandists for Netanyahu on Israeli public television, he himself came out and said that this is an Israeli proposal wrapped in fancy American cellophane. And he said the quiet part out loud. So what I think we're seeing here is, Trump, I think, genuinely wants to wrap this up, so to speak, but he wants to do it on Israel's terms. So essentially what they're doing is saying, listen, accept this surrender order from Israel, and I'll see if I can do something about maybe ending the genocide. And there's no guarantees that Israel wouldn't just get its captives back and then continue with the war of annihilation. So I think it's extremely unlikely, if not flat out impossible, that Hamas would agree to such a
Jeremy,
proposal.
So, while you were talking, go ahead, Krystal.
We have an update from Barak Ravid tweeted from senior Israeli officials, quote, "The explosion in Doha is an assassination operation against senior Hamas officials." So it would appear to be confirmation of what you and others suspected was going on there.
Yeah, and again, I mean, there is a very long history of Israel assassinating Palestinian political figures, not just within the borders of historic Palestine, but externally. And again, Israel openly has said in recent days that if Hamas doesn't surrender and demilitarize and give up its arms and release the Israeli captives, that it was going to begin targeting the external leadership of Hamas. And remember, this presumably would mean that they are also attempting to assassinate the very people who would be negotiating a ceasefire. And Donald Trump just days ago submitted what he said is a new proposal for a ceasefire. So doing that and then turning around and assassinating the negotiators while they're deliberating a proposal from the president of the United States sends a message that the U.S. is backing Israel in just constantly choosing to murder Palestinians instead of using diplomatic roads, when the Palestinians have said repeatedly they're open to an agreement either in phases to release half the Israeli captives within 60 days and the other half once a ceasefire is negotiated, or to do an all-for-all deal. And again, Hamas made major concessions. And I think it's worth pointing out, among the concessions they made was allowing the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation to continue operating, despite the fact that upwards of 2,000 Palestinians have been killed seeking aid since May when they started. They backed off of their demand that there be a clear timeline for withdrawal of Israeli forces from the strategic Philadelphia corridor. They reduced the number of Palestinians that they were demanding be freed in return for Israeli captives. And they also agreed to allow an Israeli-enforced buffer zone to encircle the entirety of the Gaza Strip, at some points piercing 1,500 meters inside of Gaza. And Israel and the United States never formally responded to that offer. So, if this is true, then what they're doing, beyond the fact that they're conducting assassinations on Qatari soil, which also houses U.S. CENTCOM, which also is the lead mediator in these talks, they are killing the very people that Donald Trump just sent an offer to try to reach a ceasefire deal.
Wow. Jeremy, this may be a dumb question, but it's pretty clear that that Israel and the U.S. are just seeking unconditional surrender. The terms that you just laid out effectively, would not only lead to a quote unquote new government, but Israeli continued occupation, control of this so-called buffer zone. What exactly does Hamas see as the difference between that already, pretty extraordinary concessions, considering what they started out with, as opposed to unconditional surrender? Like, why don't they just take the unconditional surrender if they're effectively signing their own demise and their own control anyways?
Well, two things. One is, and Hamas leaders have said this to me privately, they don't want to be in control of Gaza anymore. This is an albatross around the neck of Hamas, and it has been for many, many years. So, they've said quite clearly they're willing to relinquish control. The issue, though, is that while we say Hamas, it's not just Hamas. There are many Palestinian political groups, including those opposed to Hamas or that are not allied with Hamas, including those that have no armed factions but are political parties that stand for elections, that also have been part of these negotiations. And what they all have said is that our right to bear arms in opposition to an illegal occupation by a colonial apartheid state is a legitimate right. And so while Hamas could say, okay, we step down from power, we're not going to exist anymore in this format, they're not going to sign a document that says we agree to demilitarize the Gaza Strip. In fact, they've said we don't have the right to do that is a question for the Palestinian people. And consistently in public opinion polls, Palestinians support the right to armed resistance. I think at the end of the day, the direct answer to your question is that they view that not as a surrender of Hamas as a political entity or a movement, but that it would be them taking the outrageous action of surrendering the Palestinian cause of liberation. And whatever anyone thinks of Hamas, I think that's a true statement, given that Hamas is used as kind of the catch-all to describe Palestinian armed resistance right now. The fact is that the armed struggle, far predates Hamas. And if Hamas surrenders itself and dismantles and no longer exists, another group of Palestinians are going to rise up under the same type of banner with the same aim to repel Israel's occupation and liberate Palestine by any means necessary, including armed force. So, you have to look at this not in the context of October 7th, but in the context of 76 years of history. And I think that genuinely is how the Hamas negotiators view this.
Jeremy, last question I have for you is, do you find it plausible that Israel could have gone forward with this assassination operation without, at least in some way, having been greenlit by the U.S.?
There were some reports that Donald Trump had relayed to Hamas that was an option on the table. Mm-hmm. When I spoke to Hamas leaders over the past several days, none of them said that was true. They didn't exactly say that it was false, but they said, not that I know of, not according to my information. It would surprise me if there wasn't some form of consultation with Donald Trump. And look, the guy just greenlit this strike on the boat off of Venezuela.
Right.
There's still questions about who the people were that they killed. Yeah. He greenlit an assassination of Qasem Soleimani in his first term, bombing him in a third country in Baghdad, Iraq. So, do I know that Donald Trump was aware of this? No. Do I suspect it? Yes.
I mean, Jeremy, as you laid out, CENTCOM is there. Nothing's flying in the airspace over there without U.S. At least my own personal speculation, in terms of pure deconfliction, right? For making sure that, U.S. assets don't get confused. This is still an extraordinary message. That's actually my last question. How is the Gulf going to handle this? So if you are the UAE, if you're Saudi Arabia, and I know they have complicated relations themselves with Qatar, obviously, but I mean, for them, the answer has to be, you can house U.S. troops, you can buy hundreds of billions of dollars in U.S. arms, and you still may see basically, explosions and attacks by a U.S. ally on your soil. I mean, doesn't it undermine a lot of their own security doctrine?
I mean, first of all, many Palestinians see the United Arab Emirates as basically now a self-declared suburb of Israel. It was the lead figure in the Abraham Accords, but also is, constantly taking Israel's side. But if you look at Qatar, this is a different equation. I mean, you mentioned CENTCOM being there, but Trump also has these huge business deals going on, not just for, officially in his capacity as president and getting his airplane and, all those things, but also his family businesses. So there's deep ties there. The cold hard fact at the end of the day is that what the U.S. and Israel have shown is that Israel can do whatever it wants in that region, and not a single Arab country, particularly those in the Gulf, are going to do a thing about it. So, Israel doesn't need these normalization agreements anymore. Israel has shown that it can do whatever it wants. It can strike wherever it wants, and not a single one of these decrepit regimes are going to do a thing about it. And that's the cold fact at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You're right.
I think that's well said.
Shocking.
Jeremy, thank you so much. Great to have your insights as always.
Thank you, guys.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show, ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.